Parshas Yitro. What a Parsha. Okay, I'm a little bit biased. It's my bar mitzvah Parsha. So happy birthday to me, right? But what a Parsha. It's hard to imagine a Parsha that surmounts Yitro. I may be a little biased, but precious maybe? Mizos HaBracha maybe? Matan Torah? And yet, oddly, Matan Torah is prefaced by a very prosaic and pedestrian story of Yisro arriving in Har Elokim. Now, at a logistical level, Yisro has to arrive to restore or return Moshe's family. That could have been summarized in a few quick psukim, and the build-up to Har Sinai could have been truncated or abbreviated. And I don't know, if I were to be authoring the Parsha of Har Sinai, Matan Torah, I would start with Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Bereshis Bar Elokim, Vaydaber Hashem El Moshe Le'imor Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Maybe B'chodesh HaShlishi, L'tzeis B'nei Yisrael Me'eretz Mitzrayim, start with the arrival and the preparations. This whole business with Yisro and his arrival and his advice to Moshe, and Moshe listening to the advice, which ironically, but obviously lends the Parsha its strange name. Ask yourself not just what you'd begin the Parsha with, but what you'd call the Parsha, which of course is dependent upon what appears in the beginning of the Parsha. And I don't know, I wouldn't call it Yisro, I'd call it Chorev, Sinai, Torah, Har Elokim, Anochi, Aseres Ad. So many names to refer to this Parsha other than Yisro. Why is this section inserted unnaturally before Matan Torah and Aseres Hadibros? And the answer is threefold. There are three crucial lessons that we learn from Parshas Yisro and the introduction in Yisro's arrival. One is an issue I spoke about 2 weeks ago, Parshas Va'era. I'll just repeat it. And then the other two are a little bit not new, things I haven't spoken about yet. As I spoke about in Parshas Va'era, the arc of Moshe's life and the trajectory of his relationship with the Ribono Shel Olam is a function of his Mesiras Nefesh Ta'am Yisrael. The more he's Moser Nefesh, the more of HaKadosh Baruch Hu he sees, and it's not a reward, it's a reality, because our interface with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not a personal one alone, it's also a collective, and the more we align ourselves and affiliate ourselves with our people, that is a interface, that is a portal, that's a conduit to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How much can I really see HaKadosh Baruch Hu through my own mind and experience? But when I open my mind to Jewish history and Jewish peoplehood and Am Yisrael and their needs, I'm seeing HaKadosh Baruch Hu in ways that transcend my own limited experience, and I'm seeing more of Hashem. So it's not a reward for Moshe, the more that he's Moser Nefesh Ta'am Yisrael, it's a reality. And it starts in Va'era, where he becomes the leader of a nation, not just the head of a family. Va'era l'Avram l'Yitzchak v'Yaakov b'kel shakai u'shmei Hashem lo nadati lahem. It continues at Har Sinai because Moshe attends to the needs of the Jewish people from day until night. And Yisro was worried sick. Navol Tibol, you're going to wilt. It's too hard for you. Please delegate authority. Please build a bureaucracy. Please, please. So until we see Moshe dedicating selflessly, self-annihilatingly his life to Am Yisrael, he doesn't stand at Har Sinai in the same way. Moshe Rabbeinu was spotlighted at Har Sinai. Har Sinai is not just mass revelation, it's also I'm going to speak to you. So all that spotlighting of Moshe Rabbeinu has to be a product of Mesiras Nefesh, so we have to see what Yisro sees. So we have to introduce the subject. Yisro comes and this is what he sees. But there are two other issues that are more directly related to Yisro and his arrival. Actually three, now that I thought about it, three. So the three is really four. One old, three new. Number one, we don't want a bachelor standing on Har Sinai. We do not see marriage, raising children, either of the two, as inferior, as a distraction from spirituality, as a Moshe Rabbeinu Har Sinai is the Uberman. He is the role model. He is the personality that dominates the entire Tanakh. He's our idol. This is what we all aspire to be. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe Emes, Visaraso Emes. Who is that person going to be on top of Har Sinai? A bachelor or a married person with children? Moshe's children and wife were on the sidelines for Yitzias Mitzrayim. They had to be in the witness protection program in Midian, like in living in New Mexico, because it was too hot, and Paro could have easily retaliated against them and vented his anger to Moshe against his family. So they were on the sidelines for good reason, but now they have to be reunited with Moshe Rabbeinu for Har Sinai to begin, because that person, Moshe, cannot stand on top of Har Sinai as a bachelor. Excuse me. And that's why Yisro has to come, and that's why the big deal who Yisro is coming with, and Sipora Eshes Moshe v'shnei voneha. We don't celebrate celibacy. We don't celebrate, we don't see children as a burden to raise children as other cultures or religions did. My avodas Hashem is the svarim that I learn, the chesed I perform, the communities I build, the high-minded values I think of, and my family. The Gemara says in Shabbos, when you get to Shemayim, one of the 4 or 5 questions will be asked is asakta bepuria verivia. And of course, the question is not just did you bring children into this world, but did you invest in raising them and nurturing them and cultivating them? Tachas kanfei Shechina. And of course, this is especially true in our day and age where family dynamics are under siege and being stressed. The ability to see family life as part and parcel, as integrated, as an element of your avodas Hashem, rather than neutralizing it or in some ways not demonizing it, but it gets in the way of my real avodas Hashem. So Moshe has to be married with children. The third reason that we need to see Yisro's arrival is because of what he sees. And he doesn't just see Moshe Rabbeinu's dedication, he also sees him answering their questions. As a derech yelchuva, he has hamaaseh asher yasun. We see Am Yisrael pre-Har Sinai, pre-commandment, pre-mitzvah v'yoseh, pre-kaf aleim har kegigas, pre-kol asher diber Hashem nasa v'nishma, thirsting for Torah, thirsting for encounter with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What were they learning? They didn't have Torah yet. They had something. They had Kriyas HaTorah from Parshas B'Shalach, Vayechu Shloshes Yom V'lo Matzu Mayim, so they had some recorded writings of Hashem. Lo bat lo yeshiva me'avoseinu, Chazal say, so Avram went to yeshiva, Yitzchak in particular, Yaakov, Shem Va'iver, Ves Yudah Shal Chafanav Goshna, L'Horis L'Fanav. So that's something, but they were thirsting for contact with Hashem, for knowledge, for guidance, for religion, for who is this HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Tell us a little more about him. Because, as I mentioned last week in the B'Shalach share, we believe that the Ratzon Hashem is congruent and consistent with human needs, and that human beings will seek Hashem not just because they're commanded, but because they want to, and they realize that it's necessary for human spirituality, for meaning, for growth, for purpose, for contentment. So it is absolutely crucial that before we are inaugurated into a world of mitzvah v'yoseh, where we have to, we see Am Yisrael studying Torah, searching out the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because we want to, even though we don't have to. And it's such an important framing, because even when we have to, we realize that we want to. And we're not just sacrificing or surrendering our better selves and our better interests for a stake in Olam Haba, because Hashem commanded us. We're frightened of punishment and penalties. It's because we realize Kihim Chayenu v'Yarachimenu Kitov Lanu, and we want to find the will of Hashem because we know that it is beneficial for us. So that's the second reason, or the third reason we have to see Yisro. It frames, what he sees frames Nasa v'Nishma Kavalim Harkagiyas. And then the final reason we have to experience Yisro's arrival before Matan Torah can occur is because Hashem's revelation at Har Sinai is intended at some point, and I'll get to that in a moment, to be an international event. The end game of history, the telos of history, the terminus of history, the goal of history is not just Jewish triumphalism and Jewish success and Jewish triumph and everyone else disappears off the face of the earth. We believe that history is a process, and we are driving that process to its endpoint, and its endpoint is V'yeda kol po ki ata pe'alta v'yaven kol yitzor ki ata yitzarto v'yamar kol asher neshama b'apo Hashem Elokei Yisrael malach u'malchus b'cham l'shallah l'sakin olam b'malchus shakai b'yoma hu yeh Hashem echad u'shmo echad. And if Matan Torah is a mile marker in that process, or one can even say the launch of Hashem's revelation, then it has to contain an international element. Now, Hashem did intend there to be a more pronounced internationalization of Matan Torah. Chazal darshan that the Rebbeinu Shalom offered the Torah to Edom, to Yishmael, based on the pasuk Hofia mehar paran v'asab rivos kodesh b'mino ish daslamo in Parshas Vizos habracha. And of course, the purpose of that medrash, the meaning of the medrash, is not that had Edom accepted Torah, we would have been closed out from Torah, and they would have been the Am HaNivchar or Yishmael. It just means that we would have received the same Torah we did receive, which was intended for us, Bereshis Bar Elokim, Bishvil Yisrael Shenikra Reshis. And Hashem would have delivered some facsimile of Torah to Edom and Yishmael more directly. And instead, they rejected it, and now the arc of religious history is different. They didn't accept HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Torah, now they have to pick it up through us and from us. And that's going to be arduous and torturous and violent and contaminated and adulterated. But I'm describing Christianity and Islam, which is not a pure blend of monotheism, but it's certainly major steps towards understanding Hashem. Much better than paganism and black magic and voodooism and Greek polytheism. So Matan Torah was meant to be an explicit and frontal international experience, and it didn't, and it wasn't, because the human beings have Bechira Chavshis, and humanity did not yet accept HaKadosh Baruch Hu that frontally. But for us to maintain that recognition that at least one day it will be, and that Matan Torah is earmarked for an international audience, there has to be an international representative, and he has to be a religious person, and Yitro is the symbol. He is the observer status. He's a Kohen Midyan, Kohen On. He's a religious person. He's a Kohen. His religious thoughts in his mind. And what happens to Yisro in the end, it's hard to know, because he appears in Baloscha. Is that a new story? Is that just a rewriting of the story in Yisro? But it sounds like he doesn't remain with the Jewish people, but he and his descendants remain close to the Jewish people, the Keni, and who the Keni become and how they influence history. Right now, the facts don't matter. It's the symbolism that matters, because there has to be, as we would say, a non-Jew. I don't like saying the word guy, because for so many Jews, the word guy is a pejorative, and it's said with disdain and contempt. And it's such a dangerous trend in Orthodox Judaism today. In America for one reason, and in Israel for a totally different reason, but there's a convergence of racism, xenophobia towards non-Jews, as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu was going to exterminate them all, and this is not our Masara, this is not our derech, this is not the derech of our Avos, not the derech of... The Tanaim had some statements that in Amoraim, in the current context, would feel discriminatory, but they were operating in a very different world with murderers and violent barbarians, and we're not in that world. We live in a world of civility and civilization, and all the statements that people are making about non-Jews and discriminatory and bigoted statements, they're simply treif. You don't have to disdain non-Jews in order to celebrate Jewish pride. They tell a story about the Meshech Chachma, that every day the Meir Simcha Kohen of Dvinsk would walk home from shul the same route, and he would stop by the home of his beautiful home, mansion, of the most prestigious non-Jew in town, who was a philosopher, who was a philanthropist, who was well-known. He'd just stare at the gate. And at some point, people asked him, Rebbe, Pasnish, you're sitting there so enamored with a non-Jew. And Meir Simcha said, when I think of Shalosani Guy, I don't want to think about the drunk lawless, reckless guy in the street, and I'm not that. I want to think about a guy, a non-Jew, who is fulfilling his mission to the best of his calling, and civilized and decent and intelligent and philanthropic and moral, and still Hashem chose me for something different and something higher and something. So Yisro has to be there. So there are four, to summarize, there are four reasons that Parshas Matan Torah is called Parshas Yisro and begins with the arrival of Yisro. Number one, because of what he sees. He sees Moshe Rabbeinu dedicated selflessly to the Jewish people. He sees people thirsting for spirituality and Devar Hashem, even though they're not commanded. And not just what he sees, but who he brings. Number three, he brings Moshe's family to reunite them with Moshe, so that Moshe is a married father, not a bachelor. He's not a monk. And finally, he is a symbolic representation of the broader audience for which Torah is intended.